excited now to introduce our next session, which is a thought-provoking panel discussion titled, Will Building AI Platforms In-House Outpace Vendor Solutions in the Sprint to Actionable Insight? So in this session, industry leaders will debate which path truly leads to faster, more effective insights. Joining us on this panel are Geeta Pyne, Senior Managing Director and Chief Architect at TIAA. We then have Veris Zhang, VP and Global Product Leader for Business Experimentation at MasterCard. And this session will be moderated by our friend Arvind Balasundaram, Executive Director, Commercial Insight and Analytics at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. So, my friends, I give you but now, please join me in giving a huge round of applause as we welcome our panelists to the stage.
One example comes to mind for me that I think about on this topic. So one of the things that we do is we partner with our clients to actually help them quantify and understand the impact of some of their AI programs. It's one of the things that my team does. And in one case, we actually partnered with a QSR, a fairly innovative QSR company that was really excited, had a lot of executive leadership excitement around adopting new AI solutions and technologies. And so they brought in a vendor to help them really reimagine the customer purchasing experience for those QSR customers with the vision, with the ambition of, hey, we're going to make it really personalized, really custom. We're going to provide tailored and curated prompts depending on the time of day, depending on what weather it looks like, to really kind of improve the experience and improve profits for the business. So they spent a couple months getting all the technology set up, rolling it out, and certainly they rolled it out much more quickly than they would have been able to do it by building it internally. But when we came in, it took us 5 days to find out that there was an immediate impact to their selling and their profits in the wrong direction. And it turned out that their customers actually did not enjoy this new experience that was deployed. Fortunately, they were testing it and evaluating it, so there was minimal impact before they saw this. And what they had to do was go back to the vendor and say, hey, look, the kind of generic solution, the generic recommendations that you have in your models aren't working for our customers, for our business. And they were able to go back and refine that and tailor that. But I think the lesson for me there is, hey, taking something off the shelf isn't always going to generate the impact that you need. And you really need to be careful about evaluating that along the way to know the answer.
That's great. Geeta, any?
Yeah, I think I would say, there is a lot packed in the speed to insight, right? I think if we start from the entire, tech eval process, from the first stage of like identifying what is the right problem to solve, to getting into insight. But to me, that speed to insight is always about the business, just as you just said, Ferris, about the business impact, the business outcome. It's not just about like, okay, how quickly can I ship the code? But I think identifying at the different phases of that evaluation, how quickly can you even figure it out? Like, is it something you want to move forward? Or before even you get to the insight, right? And I think that is a multi-step process. And I think that is what, to me, process of elimination upfront, which is the path you're going to take. I call it like say, express lane POC, for example. Not everything goes into the same lane. So how quickly can you have clear decision filters around, is this the right problem? Is this the way am I going to, and get to that build, buy, acquire, partner kind of a decisioning? Doing a quick experimentation to do the smell test event. Should I even proceed further, right? Before, and then go through the process. But something like that, to me, is also very, very important, so that you are not spending 3 months, 6 months, then realizing, hey, my speed, actually I lost it because I'm back to the square one. Hopefully that makes sense.
No, perfect. It's actually a good segue to a question, Geeta, I want to ask you. You mentioned a couple of things. One is, spending 3 to 6 months getting to the place, right, which is an interesting issue on its own, and you mentioned business impact a couple of times. Right, I know all of us sit in the CFO office, often justifying investments, and so I wanted to pick your brain a little bit to see how do you feel about the cost issue between the two options, opportunity costs, maintenance costs, they're all different, right? So any words of wisdom there?
Yeah, I don't know wisdom or not, but lots of scars of doing this for decades, right? And actually, as a matter of fact, this morning also, I'm just going back and forth our teams, right? I think if we think about the total cost of ownership, I think TCO model may have changed based on AI, agentic. You can't have a conversation without saying agentic today's day and age. So whether it is AI, whether it is agentic, some of the variables might have been different, but I think thinking through the basic components of, again, going back to like, how quickly can I just build it? Not, as you mentioned, right? There is the whole aspect of like, how am I going to do the updates? What would it take to do continuous maintenance? How do we do continuous enhancement? Then the different aspects of the cost during, whether it is runtime cost, whether it is, keeping it up to date and current, right? So there is a whole facet about, I think, both if you are building the software, in-house, or are you buying it? But I think there is also an aspect of, what I look for is, especially, how do you guide somebody with a very principles? I'm dogmatic about principles-driven decision-making, because I don't make all the decisions, but I am also make a lot of, as the chief architect of the company, I have a lot of responsibility to make sure am I guiding the organization in the right way, right? So the way I look at it is really stratifying what is your core, like why would somebody come to you? What's your differentiating capability? That thou shall has to be best in class. So connecting your investment posture to the what and the impact, and then it becomes like your commodity and the context, right? And if I now look at the top level, that is what you want to be known in for, differentiating. Now, if you want to make it like a best in class, now do I have the in-house, skills, right? You mentioned about the cost. That becomes, do I have the talent? Do I have the process? Do I have the tech? Or can I actually accelerate? Now, talking about AI, this is where I think a lot of startups comes in really handy to complement or augment, or you could go to an established vendor too, right? That's how I kind of create a model, but again, also take a very short and the long lens both, because of the life cycle of the technology is so much changing. So what do you need to do now? What can you do knowing the information in hand? But as an architect, then how can you abstract those technologies so that you're almost like little to no impact to your consumers, right? So there is a different, so architecture matters, and I would say, especially now in the age of AI, I think thinking through the whole, enterprise architecture, your dependencies, how all these things fit together is also a huge factor of the cost. Something at a, cursory level might feel like, oh my God, this is the best thing that will work. But the moment you put it into beyond a single use case to an enterprise, everything like that cost model just goes out of the window, right?
Yeah.
So I would say those like different variables, but the key takeaway for me is really think through the software architecture, enterprise architecture, working with different people across the stack to be able to figure it out. What does the total cost looks like?
Yeah. And so let me just pick up on something you said about, the fast pace of change, right? So Ferris, I just want to kind of, maybe you have some thoughts about MasterCard and how you guys deal with it. But does a vendor option lock you in during a time of great change? I know there's debate on, and we'll visit both sides, but I was interested in your perspective.
Yeah, I think there's certainly risk, especially given all of the innovation and the pace of change right now, of locking yourself into a certain choice. I don't think that you can certainly work with vendors in a way that doesn't lock yourself in, right? But I think just how quickly things are changing, who has the best models, and as there's a debate and a move towards more specific, industry verticalized use cases or functional specific agents and models, that we certainly want to be ready to capture the latest and greatest. We have a team at MasterCard focused on AI, and a large part of what they're doing is keeping up with developments in the industry and in the market and saying, hey, who has the latest and greatest, and how can we utilize that? And knowing that 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 12 months from now, the answer could be very different. And so leaving ourselves open to that is, I think, is a critical aspect of our posture and our approach overall.
So when you said you have a team at MasterCard, right? Let me focus there a little bit, because that brings up the big issue of talent, right? And I know we deal with that on a daily basis when trying to build, right? Could you maybe share some thoughts around, does it make sense when talent is scarce, especially with changing AI? What are the trade-offs on build versus buy? And do you have a perspective there?
Specifically around the context of talent, right, and how we maintain that. I will take it back to something Geeta said a little bit earlier of thinking about your differentiation and what is the impact that you're trying to drive. Because in some ways, AI is an investment like any other investment that you can make as a business, right? It's a new technology, it's a new way of doing things. And as a company, like, what is your point of differentiation? What are you going to be uniquely good at? And I think the realistic answer for most companies out there is we're not going to be the best at all AI capabilities solving everything, right? And part of that is the talent challenge. Like, it's really hard to find all of that top talent. But just in general, I think as a business strategy perspective, do we want to be investing in that as a primary point of differentiation? And for some companies, the answer is yes, right? For some companies, the answer is yes. At MasterCard, we view AI as a strategic investment in certain core parts of our business. Specifically, some of the big examples that are public are around kind of the fraud and decisioning space for what we do for MasterCard. That's critical to our core business. We think that there's a large strategic advantage that we have by investing in AI-based capabilities in that space. But even we are then kind of partnering and using other approaches and other types of use cases, right? Internal productivity, other tools that we have. And so, yes, I think there is definitely a talent constraint, but also just a general business investment constraint that you should be thinking about, like, where and why should we invest in our own capabilities, in our own build solutions, versus, if the goal is just get something up and running, like, if my use case is very specific to me or a strategic differentiator, you may want to lean more towards build. But if it is less specific to me or just a general purpose thing that's not meant to be a strategic differentiator for me in the market, like, I would argue there's probably better ROI for your teams to focus elsewhere than building that yourself.
Yes, so you're bringing up this idea of hybrid balancing, right? Which is fascinating, because one of the things I know we talk a lot about is when it comes to talent, sometimes you can get very insular in your thinking if you just stayed within, right? So Geeta, I don't know if you had thoughts around how you deal with that at TIA.
Yeah. So for TIA, I think I would say, again, we are a financial services. Our bread and butter is the best, retirement, wealth management, asset management, right? So yes, to like Ferris's point, there are certain areas where we want AI to be the best, whether it is making sure, whether same like a risk, fraud, secure, trust, those areas, right? But again, fundamentally, in order to do that, am I not leveraging, open source model or, other foundational model, frontier models or third parties? Yes, we are, but then how you where is your core differentiator to me? That talent also then gets mapped into, is this the skills, again, what internally we have? But I believe in, that the rate it is about the ecosystem and the partnership. No one company, whether it is TIA, whether it is MasterCard, whether it is somebody, can do everything on their own, right? And it is the only way to, which is why the interoperability. So I think in the talent conversation, I believe in that people that can really understand how do you integrate together, how do you make things interoperable, how do you make sure that you are truly building a composable architecture, and for the composable business, that matters really. I mean, it has been always important, but it's crucial. It is almost like survival right now, right? I would also say one other thing, like when you talk about build versus buy, right? I think many a time, maybe stating the obvious is we felt like, hey, I can throw one Scrum team in few weeks, 6 weeks, in 2 or 3 sprints, I can get it done. But we forget about the other aspects of the continuous enhancement. So I would strongly recommend that when we look for a build option, I'm an engineer, I'm a builder, right? I love to build, but I love to build only things that are differentiating. Please challenge your teams to make sure that they're thinking about that, is this the best use of your engineering talent, or would you rather spend somewhere else? And the last thing I would say, it is not just build or buy, I think it is and. So you could buy and then you can and extend. So you talked about vertical models versus generic, right? You might get something, and which is why, like, whether you get a generic agent or generic things, does it have that extendability that can I interject to change the behavior based on mine, right? So I see the world as, yes, some things are buy, but then, but buy and extend, and so only a smaller portion I would be building for companies like mine.
So let me take that a bit further and stay with you for a second. And Ferris, I want your opinion on this one too. When you say build and then get some features in there, right? There's this whole customizable element, right? Does it give you flexibility when everybody wants, like, obviously their own differentiated platform, but then the feature velocity that you get buying might be significantly better. So any thoughts there, Geeta?
Yes, totally. I would say, and I'll give concrete example. For example, right now, say, even not just the, when we talk about transformation, there is also fundamental tech transformation, especially 100 plus years. And I think a lot of financial industries companies are probably not born in the Silicon Valley, in the internet age, or in the AI age now, right? Like, I work for a 100 plus years old company. So I have tons of legacy, right? How am I transforming? And in that, in order to get the feature velocity for the customers, I have to also upgrade my tech stack. And is that something, am I going to write something? Or am I going to be able to bring in some third-party models that can actually, instead of doing one at a time, so staying with AI, I can say I can use Q, Amazon Q, to do generate code, but that is one at a time. Or can I actually point something to my repo that thousands of my repositories can be upgraded at the same time, right? So I think those are the choices that you have to be really crucial about. That is this again, yes, you can always build, like given time and money, like everything is possible. But by then, is it the right value? So to me, that's where, and also look for just not just that today I'm shipping one feature, but what is the cost of like continuously being enhanced? Businesses will change. Like, what is to your point about how can I accommodate fast enough? So I might sound like I'm against building. Let's make it clear, I'm not against building, but building what is right. I am lazy. I'm a software engineer, computer science. I like to do things only when needed, right? And leverage when you can. So I build for only differentiation.
And I know there's no right answer to this, so I just want to caveat what you just said about not wanting to take just one side, right? But Ferris, an interesting idea here is, I'm a chess player, right? So I believe in the first move. And if you make this decision, right, and I think the whole game depends on the first move, right? So let's say you make a decision to build or buy. Does that lock you into like developing where you're going, or any thoughts there?
First of all, I would like to say I was not warned that we were discussing chess strategy before I came to the session. So I'm woefully unprepared for that. But in this specific space, I don't think one particular direction is going to lock you in the outset, right? And I think I saw some reactions from the crowd when Geeta was speaking about build and buy and thinking about that. And someone on the earlier panels actually said, we want to partner, right? We really want to be working with the broader ecosystem. So I think the reality is at least from what I've seen, a lot of companies are looking at, okay, how do we do all of this kind of in conjunction? And that's probably the right way to look at it from my perspective as well. There are certainly, and I think, MasterCard is one of the companies that's leaning a lot into, okay, there are a lot of things we do want to build because there are a lot of things that fall in that category of, hey, we really want to own this and we are committed to investing in growing that and being able to kind of maintain all of the ongoing needs and things that Geeta mentioned. But realistically, I think we should all be looking at the combination of options.
Yeah. I just want to add that I think even if you build, I think having that abstraction, I'll tell you, I won't tell the vendor's name right now. I need to make a short-term decision right now because in August business needs something. So I'm going with the buy option, but I know that may not be the long-term right answer. So I am laser focused on making the team that you build the abstraction. A fast follow, I might be swapping with something else. So I think to prevent your lock-in, you should always think about. But on the other side, there are certain things like, if I use AWS as my primary cloud as an example, I would go all in because I'm not in the business of infrastructure, like building. I'm not building a hyperscaler. So tomorrow, like I might be using something soft, maybe with a cursor or windsurf today, but AWS just announced, for example, agent code last week. That becomes a cursor of AWS now, right? So I think going with somebody, again, it depends on what's your vendor strategy, partnership strategy, and technology strategy, where you are going to take bets on which vendors. It might be okay to be locked in because you can get economies of scale and negotiation with the vendors that, hey, help me because I'm going all in on you in this particular layer.
So Ferris, there's another contentious issue that comes up. So it comes up a lot in healthcare, and I know several of my colleagues in the industry are here. I'm sure you deal with it too, which is this notion of innovation, right? AI is very innovative. It's expensive to invest in. I sometimes get this question around, if we use our own solution, we preserve some of the, sustainability of that innovation. Versus if you went into building, how much are you contributing to lift all the boats, right? And so that issue never goes away. And I was wondering if you have a point of view on that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think for me that comes back to that earlier point of what are the places where we want to be differentiated and what are the things that are going to be uniquely us that we want to bring. Versus what are we comfortable relying on and kind of growing on. And I think there is, so I sit in product management, right? And one of the core skills in product management is prioritization, right? There's so many different things that we want to do. And really we have to figure out where are we going to focus our energy. And that's fundamentally what's going to make or break your direction and your strategies. Like, can you actually narrow in on what's going to make a difference? So I think my viewpoint on that would be consistent with, hey, let's focus on the places that are going to be the core differentiators for our business, for what we're trying to accomplish. And let's be comfortable kind of moving with the crowd or working alongside on the areas that aren't.
Geeta, I've got to believe with the information you deal with at TIA, it's a very sensitive issue as well. How do you kind of prevent, kind of contributing inside, proprietary things sometimes into other platforms and managing that risk?
That's a very, very important part of what we do, right? And that's why building, some of the guardrails around and also integrating all the, like say, for data classification policies, being able to observe. The first step is being able to, no matter what you code as a policy, somebody will make a mistake, intentionally and non-intentionally, right? So I believe in how do you have that observability full stack? And I think we had Fiddler.ai earlier talking about observability, right? So that's one of the things, like, we make sure, and then before things get built, like be looking at what are the approved patterns that we are going to allow. So if I have, X, like this is the type of data, this is the, type of access policies, this is, and accordingly then codify those, and those are the ones that, so as much decisioning, I would say, you can take away from individual teams and codify them, create the paved paths, and which becomes a part of your code platform and push it there. So if it is not a pattern or a template or a blueprint that has been codified, sometime the first time you are coming with a use case, that gets reviewed and that gets so that's how basically making those decisioning, making sure we are not, but then again, you have to observe what's happening to make sure that you are not leaking anything unintentional, whether it is, DLP. So we have pretty much right from the 7 layer of the stack from digital to infra, making sure that we are putting the tight guardrails. Are we 100%? No. I mean, then we are not in the business, because you will see something that you haven't seen before, right? But specifically with AI and generative AI, sometimes we might feel like we are slow, because we need to be responsible. So we can, we got to make sure that we have a, cross-functional responsible AI policy team and things. But what I try to do, Arvind, is as much as I can codify things so that and then people have like, okay, here is what you can or cannot, and put them through those kind of a constraint. And of course it goes through that, right? One thing I wanted to, if it is okay to add, like one thing I have been trying to do so that, like, just to your point, prioritization lens, like creating and like what does TIA, for example, do have a capability map. I've created an opportunity index on the map with, say, AI. So that becomes my first level of filter. Then the second level of filter is your differentiation. Third level, what is your current state maturity versus target? So you kind of almost like go down like your funnel might be this, but you narrow down. So at least something that you can already have a lens for prioritization. Then it becomes like, is this something we want to go do it now, later, or tomorrow? So that's what I've been doing to help the entire company. Yeah.
So I know we have under 5 minutes. I want to try to get us to a close, right, and try to pull all of these very interesting discussion topics back. So Ferris, let me start with you, right? We have agentic, that's the theme of this forum. There's multimodal retrieval analytics, there's synthetic data, there's causal AI, there's counterfactual law. There's a ton of stuff coming at us, right? So what does that future look like? Do you think, very clearly it's going to be hybrid, I think. But how do you think the balance between build, buy, and orchestration is going to work, in your opinion?
I think it's a great question. I think the only thing that, frankly, I'm certain of is just the pace of change, right? All of these things, I think there can be more things thrown at us, not fewer things thrown at us. And so successfully navigating it, I think, are going to be the businesses. One that I think orchestration is a really interesting focus area in term, right? It's how can you orchestrate across all of the tools and solutions that you have available to you. And so I think success is going to rely on a couple of things. I think one is just continued flexibility in what you are doing, being open to and adaptive to what's in front of you. I think there is what we talked about at the very beginning, the focus on the business impact. So I think really the most successful businesses, frankly, I don't think it's going to be the one who stumbles on the secret AI model that trumps all other AI models. I don't think that's going to be the answer today, right? But it's going to be the business that can effectively implement and then evaluate, is this driving the core business drivers that I wanted it to evaluate, to be able to do that effectively, quickly, and then have the confidence and have the discipline to then pivot and change directions if it's not working the way that it's working. And I think that's what's going to be the secret to success in a lot of ways.
Geeta, you agree with that point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. I think orchestration, what I would say, not to repeat what Ferris said, right? I think we have to reimagine and rethink every function we do. My role as a chief architect is changing and will change. What is my craft going to be? What's my team? I think workforces of the future and workflows of the future have to be determined, and within that, yes, you will be doing orchestration really important. How do we think about, identity? Today, for integration today, we talk about MCP and A2A. To me, that's like a TCP IP layer there is a bunch of stuff not flushed out, right? So I think those protocols, those have to evolve. But I think what is in our control is really what I'm very much focused on is how do I redefine and reimagine what our workforce of the future would be, and then accordingly also what are the workflows, then you map your technology. That's just my way of thinking about the future.
So that's great. So I know we have 1 minute and a few seconds, but I also recognize the three of us are all on the client side. So I would love to hear at least one viewpoint on some of these issues from somebody in the supplier side, and if there's any Q&A, we'd love to take it right now. Anyone?
Are struggling to even get started. So the partnering route for most of them makes the most sense. I think it actually reinforces how they can begin using it. And arguably, that may even be differentiation for them in the beginning, but eventually it's like saying everybody has Word, everyone has Excel. Eventually everyone catches up on that route, but then it becomes just a required part of business. So I think both make sense from a supplier point of view. And I'm with Dayforce, so we have a massive HCM platform, so it makes sense.
Great. I think we're at time, so we'll be around if there's more Q&A. How about a big hand for Geeta and for Ferris? Thank you very much.